Did you know that Sarah's story, the wife of Abraham, is filled with decisions that challenged God's promises and yet altered the course of humanity? It might surprise you to learn how a woman marked by infertility and disbelief became the emblem of a divine promise that seemed utterly impossible. But here's the astonishing part. What many perceive as an irreparable mistake was transformed by God into a vital element of His perfect plan. In this video, you'll uncover how even doubts and failures can turn into the greatest spiritual triumphs. Are you ready to grasp the true power of faith? Join our community of faith and transformation. Like the video and subscribe to stay updated on our next inspiring stories. In the ancient and prosperous city of Ur of the Chaldeans lived a couple whose lives were about to change forever. Sarah, renowned for her extraordinary beauty and elegance, was the wife of Abraham, a man of unwavering faith and firm convictions. Although they enjoyed a stable and comfortable life, a shadow loomed over their happiness. Sarah could not have children, a condition that in their culture was often seen as a sign of misfortune. One day, while Abraham meditated in solitude, he received a call that would not only alter his destiny, but also impact countless generations. God spoke to him, asking him to leave his land, his home, and all that was familiar to journey toward a land he would reveal. In return, God promised to make him the father of a great nation. Though the promise seemed impossible, Abraham accepted the call with faith. However, Sarah, his companion, faced an equally momentous decision. Should she abandon everything for a divine promise that defied all logic? With her heart torn between doubt and her love for her husband, Sarah decided to follow Abraham. Their journey was not just physical, it represented a leap of faith amid uncertainty. Together, they left their home, taking with them their belongings, their servants, and above all, the hope of a promised future. Yet the journey was not without its challenges. They faced hunger, endured long days under the scorching sun, and braved the constant threat of enemies along the way. Despite these difficulties, Sarah stood steadfast by Abraham's side, demonstrating admirable loyalty and strength. However, deep within, she wrestled with unspoken questions. Could it be possible for God to fulfill His promise to her, a woman well advanced in years and barren? Doubts lingered, but so did a spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. This chapter of their lives marked the beginning of a story that would be remembered for generations to come. Sarah and Abraham not only left their homeland behind, but also abandoned their certainties, venturing into an unknown path guided by faith in a divine promise. After months of traveling, they arrived in the land of Canaan, a place unfamiliar yet brimming with new possibilities. There, God reaffirmed His promise to Abraham. His descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the seashore. These words filled Abraham with hope, but for Sarah, who bore the weight of her infertility, the promise felt like a painful reminder of the impossible. How could a woman of advanced age become a mother? Despite her doubts, Sarah supported Abraham as he built altars and dedicated prayers to God. Abraham's faith was unshakable, like a rock, but Sarah felt her own heart wavering. In moments of solitude, she pondered God's words, wondering if there might be an alternative, a human way to fulfill the divine promise. Time passed, and the trials continued. During a period of severe famine in Canaan, Abraham and Sarah were forced to journey to Egypt in search of sustenance. There, a new challenge tested their relationship and divine protection. Sarah's beauty did not go unnoticed by the Egyptians, who informed Pharaoh about the extraordinary woman in their midst. Fearing for his life, Abraham asked Sarah to say she was his sister, a strategy to prevent them from being killed. Pharaoh, captivated by Sarah's grace, took her into his palace, showering her with gifts and attention. But God did not allow Pharaoh's plans to succeed. Plagues and supernatural signs fell upon the ruler's household, compelling him to return Sarah to Abraham. This event not only strengthened Abraham's faith, but also reminded Sarah that God was actively working in her life, even during the most uncertain moments. Upon returning to Canaan, Sarah began to realize that God's promise did not depend on human limitations, but on His infinite power. Still, seeds of doubt lingered. How much longer would they have to wait to see the fulfillment of what had been promised? Sarah's faith wavered between hope and skepticism as the years continued to pass. What Sarah did not yet know was that her story was far from over. God was still weaving His plan, even amidst her doubts and fears. Time pressed on, and the words of the promise seemed to fade like a mirage in the desert. Becoming increasingly aware of her advanced age, Sarah began to think that perhaps the promise's fulfillment needed to come through other means. It was then that an idea started to form in her mind, one that would alter the course of their lives. In her desperation, Sarah suggested that Abraham take Hagar, her Egyptian servant, as a concubine. According to the customs of the time, a child born from a servant could legitimately be considered part of the family. While this decision seemed practical, it was fraught with emotional pain and sacrifice. For Sarah, it was an act of surrender, an acknowledgement that her own body could not fulfill the promise. Abraham agreed, trusting that this solution would finally bring about the long-awaited offspring. Hagar became pregnant and eventually gave birth to Ishmael. But what Sarah had envisioned as a solution quickly turned into a source of conflict. Ishmael's presence stirred feelings of jealousy and insecurity in Sarah, especially when Hagar began to exhibit an air of superiority, knowing she had given Abraham something Sarah could not. Tensions between Sarah and Hagar grew frequent, filling the household with strife. Consumed by resentment, Sarah urged Abraham to intervene. The situation escalated to the point where Hagar fled into the desert with Ishmael. However, God appeared to her, assuring her that He would also bless her son and give him a numerous lineage. When Hagar returned, the tensions did not completely disappear, but the family sought ways to coexist. Sarah, still wrestling with her emotions, began to realize that her human solution had complicated the divine plan. Yet God, in His mercy, continued to work amid human failures and weaknesses. Despite the circumstances, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she had forever closed the door to God's promise. The sight of Ishmael and Hagar was a constant reminder of her impulsive decision. However, God was not finished with her. Even amidst her mistakes, His plan was still unfolding, and Sarah was destined to play a crucial role in its fulfillment. What Sarah could not yet see was that her story, far from being a failure, was becoming a testimony of God's grace and faithfulness. In her darkest moments, the promise still shone, waiting for the perfect time to be fulfilled. On a warm afternoon, as Abraham rested by the entrance of his tent, 3 visitors approached. Their garments glowed, and though they appeared to be ordinary men, there was something heavenly about them. Abraham welcomed them with hospitality, offering food and water, unaware at first that he was in the presence of divine messengers. While sharing a meal under the shade of a tree, one of the visitors spoke words that would echo in Sarah's heart. "I will return about this time next year, and by then Sarah will have a son." Hidden behind the curtains of the tent, Sarah overheard these words and couldn't help but laugh silently. How could this be possible? She was nearly 90 years old, and her body was no longer capable of conceiving. But the visitor, who was none other than God Himself, responded to her laughter with a question that dismantled her disbelief. "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" These words resonated deeply within Sarah's heart, challenging her logic and reigniting a spark of hope that had been extinguished for years. The announcement marked a turning point in Sarah's life. Though doubts still lingered in her mind, something within her began to change. The promise was not just for Abraham, it was for her too. For the first time, Sarah began to imagine the possibility that God truly could fulfill what seemed impossible. As the visitors departed, Abraham and Sarah remained silent, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. Sarah's faith, though still fragile, began to grow stronger. The waiting was not yet over, but now there was a renewed certainty that the promise was nearing fulfillment. Time passed, and the visitor's words began to take form within Sarah's womb. Against all logic and expectation, she conceived. Each passing day brought Sarah tangible proof that God's promise was not merely a distant dream. The impossible had happened. A 90-year-old woman, considered barren her entire life, was carrying the child of the promise. When the day of delivery arrived, Abraham's tent was filled with joy and excitement. Servants hurried to assist Sarah, who, with tears streaming down her face, cradled her newborn. They named him Isaac, meaning laughter, a reminder of the moment Sarah had laughed at the thought of becoming a mother. But now, her laughter was one of pure joy and gratitude. Sarah declared, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." In that moment, she understood that God's promises transcend human limitations. Isaac was not merely her son. He was living evidence that nothing is impossible for the Lord. His birth brought hope not only to their family, but also to the generations that would hear this story. Abraham, too, reaffirmed his faith in God as he watched his son grow. Isaac was the fulfillment of the divine covenant, a bond between heaven and earth. Life in Abraham's tent was forever changed. The days of uncertainty and despair now felt like distant memories, replaced by the happiness of watching the child play and laugh. Yet Sarah knew her role was not complete. Though Isaac was a miracle, his life came with great responsibilities. She was tasked with protecting him, guiding him, and ensuring he grew up in faith, fully aware of the great promise he represented. Isaac grew up surrounded by the love of Sarah and Abraham, a child who embodied the promise made flesh. To Sarah, he was not just her son, but a symbol of redemption, proof that God can transform the laughter of disbelief into a song of praise. Her life, marked by years of waiting and doubt, had become a testament to God's faithfulness. On the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a grand celebration. The tent was filled with music, laughter, and voices of congratulations. But amid the joy, Sarah noticed something that deeply disturbed her. Ishmael, Hagar's son, was playing mockingly with Isaac. While others might have dismissed it as innocent, Sarah saw it as a sign of potential conflict. The years of tension between Sarah and Hagar resurfaced in that moment. Sarah feared that Ishmael, as Abraham's firstborn, might challenge Isaac's inheritance. With her heart heavy with concern, Sarah approached Abraham and asked him to send Hagar and Ishmael away. It was a difficult decision for Abraham, who loved Ishmael, but God assured him that he would also care for the boy, promising that Ishmael would become the father of a great nation. The departure of Hagar and Ishmael left an emptiness in the tent, but brought peace to Sarah's heart. Now she could focus entirely on raising Isaac, knowing he was the child of the promise. Although separating from Ishmael was painful, Sarah trusted that God had a plan for all of them. God fulfilled his word concerning Ishmael, who grew and prospered in the desert, becoming the leader of a powerful nation. This reaffirmed to Sarah and Abraham that God's promises were not only specific, but also encompassed everyone involved in his plan. With Ishmael no longer in the tent, Sarah felt that Isaac's inheritance was secure. However, she never forgot the impact of her past decisions. The story of Hagar and Ishmael remained a reminder that while human mistakes can complicate matters, God always has the power to redeem and guide. Meanwhile, Isaac grew under the loving protection of his parents, destined to carry forward the line of the divine promise. Sarah found comfort in knowing that, despite the challenges and conflicts, God's plan always prevailed. At the age of 127, Sarah closed her eyes for the last time, leaving behind an indelible legacy. Her death was a moment of profound sorrow for Abraham, who mourned his beloved wife. To honor her in a special way, he purchased a field in Machpelah, where he buried her in a cave that would later become the resting place for the entire patriarchal family. Sarah's life was a testament to faith, struggle, and redemption. Though she faced doubts, made mistakes, and endured moments of despair, her story demonstrates that God never abandons those who trust in him. Sarah, who once laughed in disbelief, ended her life as the mother of a nation, a woman who walked with God through the impossible. Isaac, the son she had waited her entire life for, was her greatest joy, and the evidence that God's promises always come to pass, even if they take time. Her legacy was not only in the lineage of Israel, but also in the example of how God uses human weaknesses to reveal his glory. The cave of Machpelah became a physical reminder of Sarah's impact. There, she rested alongside Abraham, marking the site as a symbol of the eternal covenant between God and his people. Her life not only influenced her immediate family, but also inspired future generations who found in her an example of perseverance and faith. Sarah's story transcended the boundaries of time, reminding everyone that, although God's ways often defy our logic, they always serve a greater purpose. She was more than Abraham's wife. She was a pioneer of faith, a mother of nations, and a woman whose life continues to inspire those facing seemingly impossible challenges. Sarah's story is a journey of transformation, marked by the struggle between faith and doubt, between human limitations and divine power. Through the highs and lows of her life, God proved that his faithfulness does not depend on our actions, but on his eternal nature. Sarah teaches us that waiting is never in vain. Although her years of infertility and advanced age seemed like insurmountable obstacles, God used her story to show that there are no limits to his power. Every step of her journey, from impulsive decisions to moments of laughter and tears, was part of a greater plan. Her life also reflects the importance of redemption. Despite her mistakes, such as giving Hagar to Abraham, God neither discarded her nor abandoned his promise. Instead, he used those moments to teach valuable lessons and guide her toward the fulfillment of his purpose. Sarah's laughter, which at first was an expression of disbelief, transformed into a symbol of joy and gratitude. Her son, Isaac, was living proof that God fulfills his promises, no matter how improbable they seem. His name, meaning laughter, encapsulates the transformation of a woman who moved from doubt to certainty in God's power. For us, Sarah serves as a reminder that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the decision to trust God despite it. Her legacy invites us to reflect on our own lives and ask ourselves, are we willing to wait for God's promises and trust in his perfect timing? Just as Sarah found her purpose amid uncertainty, we too can find hope in the fact that God is still at work, even when we cannot see it. Her story is an eternal reminder that God's faithfulness never fails, and that, as Scripture says, nothing is impossible for the Lord. If this story touched your heart, imagine what God can do in your life, even in moments of deepest doubt and uncertainty. Sarah showed us that despite our mistakes, God's promises are far greater than our limitations. What in your life do you believe is impossible? Perhaps the answer is already on its way. Don't stop with just this story. This is only the beginning of many teachings and transformative accounts we share here. Why not become part of this growing community of faith? Give this video a like, share your greatest takeaway in the comments, and send this message to someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, subscribe so you won't miss the next stories that could change your life forever.